Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. The Joseph Parker and Junior Fa fight goes down this weekend in Auckland, New Zealand, Saturday, New Zealand time. So this will be broadcast on DAZN internationally, Foxtel in Australia, and Spark Sport on pay-per-view in New Zealand. Also pay-per-view in Australia, which I was a little surprised about. We'll talk about that a little bit later on, but this is my final sort of preview prediction type video. I'll also cover the weigh-in, a few thoughts after that happens, etc. But this is a crossroads fight for both guys, and for different reasons, but we'll come to that a little bit later on. But we'll crack straight into, well, what should we expect of the, I guess as they're calling it, the battle for New Zealand. Two guys who are well known to each other from the amateurs, having split honours in the unpaid ranks, 2 wins apiece. How is this fight going to play out? And the more that I've thought about this, I actually do think that Joseph Parker is not necessarily in trouble, but it may be a case that because a lot of people don't know Junior Fa, don't really know what he's done, where he's come from, the record is really thin. He's kind of been a guy that hasn't really proven himself. This fight is all upside for Junior Fa, and he may end up coming better than advertised. And what I mean by that is he's the bigger guy. He's got an inch or two on Joseph Parker in height and reach. He does have a decent jab, and that is if he doesn't decide to, because sometimes he can be guilty of sort of, for a big guy, sort of fighting a bit smaller. But I think he's going to keep it long in this one. And in the press conference, they sort of confirmed, along the thinking that I've had in recent weeks, that they're going to try build a lead in this fight and hold on to it. Try to end up getting a decision, but if Parker's hurt, they'll try to take him out. And that really means that, he's not going to knock Joseph Parker out. But the best chance for Junior Fa to win this fight is by decision. And that's keeping it long off the back of the jab, trying to box to a decision. Easier said than done, especially at a level he's never fought at. He is the underdog in this fight. He hasn't really sort of proven himself as a guy that can beat a guy like Joseph Parker yet, but obviously this is his chance. It's a step-up fight, significant step-up fight for Junior Fa. But I do believe that this could be a case where the first few rounds, some people may be a little surprised that they're thinking that Joseph Parker is going to come in here, take Junior Fa out, but it might actually be that Junior Fa is getting the better of some of the early exchanges. And it may not be that there's, massive combinations sort of, thrown on either side. It could be a case that Junior Fa is just sort of trying to noodle the fight, jabbing and moving and trying to make it awkward and tough for Joseph Parker early on. They expect Joseph Parker is going to come out strong. They said that as much in the press conference, and try to take Junior Fa out. We've seen Joseph Parker in some of these journeyman level fights that he's had in the past couple of years. Alex Leopai was a good example. Just went in there and really tried to take him out. And when it didn't work, he had to sort of fall back to a plan B, which was to effectively box and move, pick Leopai apart, and really he just racked up round after round after round. It sort of, was all the same pattern. I think he will have a look at Junior Fa in that first round or two and try to be a bit more aggressive than maybe he would otherwise be against a more known commodity. Because let's face it, we don't really know where Fa is at, if he's at this level, but we're going to find out. And the other thing with this is Parker's going to want to try to get to that chin early and test it. That is one of the question marks that people have had about Junior Fa and where his, from the amateurs, and he's obviously been dropped in the pros. Dominic Gwynn, a 44-year-old journeyman, put him down to the deck. And actually, I'll make that, there's a video that I've got up on the channel, some of the action from that fight. So I'll make sure that you can click to that one at the end of this video. But I think the strategy is going to be clear from the Fa camp, is keep it long, use the jab, and move. And with the shape that Junior Fa is coming in for this fight, he looks like he's going to be in the condition where he's going to be able to do that. He's going to, and this is one of the things as well, I'm sure Joseph Parker is banking on, that even if Junior Farr does sort of try to, rack up some rounds behind the back of the jab and, trying to catch Parker as he comes in, remembering Parker is the smaller guy, is probably going to have to try to close the distance. He'll be looking to get to the inside, or at least from mid-range, and he will be there to be hit. So Junior Farr will be looking to catch him on the way in. But we have to also remember, and this is one of the things that seemingly is forgotten about Joseph Parker when he fights, is he's not a great inside fighter. So I don't expect that, he's just going to go in and all of a sudden have this massive success on the inside. I think that Junior Farr's not going to just be standing there waiting for Parker to unload his shots. He's going to be sort of circling out, trying to get out of the way. He doesn't want to get into some sort of shootout or exchange with Joseph Parker, who probably does have the power to hurt him and stop him potentially. We know Parker is not the most massive puncher, and he doesn't really have any knockouts at world level. But let's face it, this is not a world level fight. This is something below that, and we're not really sure where Junior Farr's level is at. But I do think that, and this might shock some people, we could see Junior Farr having some moments of success early on. And after about 3 or 4 rounds, I could see him being up on the cards. And I'm sure a lot of people wouldn't have considered that, but I think it totally could be the case. I think where things may start to change, because I think Junior Farr, we've seen him fade in some fights in the past. There's a couple of fights in particular that I'm thinking of where rounds sort of 5 or 6, he started to sort of fade. And if that happens, that's when Joseph Parker comes into the fight a bit more. If Farr is unable to move as effectively or keep him off as effectively, I think that's when Joseph Parker can go to work and start, banking some rounds for himself, breaking down Junior Farr, and potentially taking him out later in the fight. It could even be a case similar to the Shaundale Winters fight, where Winters and Parker were boxing for a number of rounds, and then all of a sudden the knockout came quite rapidly. I think it was in the 5th round, and it was a case that over the course of those first 4 rounds, Parker was investing to the body. He was the jab was working well, but bearing in mind, Shaundale Winters a smaller fighter than Junior Farr. I think we're going to see the height and reach maximized to his advantage in this one, but the gas tank is certainly a question for Farr. If he does have an improved gas tank, the cardio is better, the conditioning is better, then maybe he can go for longer. But we also have to remember Joseph Parker in fights too. It does get to a point sort of in the mid to sort of round 6 to 8 where sometimes, and even a little bit later, he can sort of go into some sort of, it's almost, I've described it before as like an energy conserving sort of mode where he just doesn't really do too much. He sort of circles, flicks jabs and looks for a right hand, but doesn't do a whole lot. And against Dillian Whyte, for example, and in some other fights, he's lost key rounds in those rounds, sort of, 6 to 9, that sort of thing. And if he does end up sort of potentially in a somewhat close fight with Junior Farr, heading into those rounds where sometimes he does sort of drop off his activity, that's not a good place to be. But Farr is the underdog for a reason, and Parker is the favorite for a reason. Joseph Parker has the pedigree coming into this fight. He's got the big fight experience. He has been there, done that, and got the postcard. We just don't know. Is Junior Farr going to be able to sort of step up under the lights, the attention? This is a pay-per-view. He's getting paid $500,000 New Zealand dollars. That is guaranteed money. There is a potential case to say, will the moment get the best of him? And if he does sort of take a few rounds to settle into the fight, that could certainly be to Joseph Parker's favour. But I wouldn't be shocked if Junior Farr actually does sort of take a few of the opening rounds and sort of towards the midway point that it's either pretty even or he may be even up on the cards. But I do think there is a case to say that Joseph Parker, if Farr starts to slow down, and I think he will, is going to break him down, and potentially he might hurt him and drop him, maybe even take him out. But I do think this one might be a little bit more competitive than some people are expecting. And that's just because they don't know Junior Fa, but also I think the tactics of the fight, and they know each other from the amateurs. Junior Fa does have, heading into this, some good knowledge about Joseph Parker, how he fights, or at least some of his tendencies, because they have fought before. Obviously, he's developed, leaps and bounds since the amateurs, but also so too has Junior Fa. But there is a case to say that, is this really a fight that Joseph Parker can get anything out of, at least in terms of his reputation? Because if he knocks Junior Fa out, say in the first round, for example, people will say, well, that was expected. Why was he fighting this guy? But if it goes rounds, some people will question, well, actually, is Joseph Parker slipping, or is it a case that Junior Fa was better than advertised? And maybe it's something in between. We just don't know. We've got to see it so far. But there is something to be said that it could be a lose-lose, whatever the result in terms of he might get a win, but if he doesn't look spectacular, some people will go, well, actually, is he slipping down the pecking order of the heavyweight division? And so, there is a lot of pressure on Parker to perform in a major way. And he doesn't have a lot of knockouts at past a certain level of fighter. And I guess on the other side of the coin for Fa, really, it's all upside. No one really expects him to win, and if he does better than expected, gives a credible account of himself, even in a loss, then he comes away with, something other than that $500,000 payday. And should he end up getting a shock upset, because it would be a shock upset, well, obviously he sort of lays a path for a big fight down the line. So this is going to be on Spark Sport in New Zealand. There was an early bird closed quite some time ago, so you could get it for $40. I got that last year. Foxtel in Australia, 30 Australian dollars, I'm led to believe. But also, if you buy the event right now in New Zealand, it's a bit dearer than the original price. And the day before the fight, I think it goes up to 60 New Zealand dollars. Internationally, it's going to be on DAZN. Not in all markets, though. Obviously, the local market gets rorted for, $40 to $60 for pay-per-view, depending on when you brought it. And they've got Australia on pay-per-view, which you could argue in Australia, it's maybe not a pay-per-view worthy fight. At least I don't believe it is. Even for New Zealand, I think it's somewhat borderline. They've been trying to market it as the biggest sort of fight in New Zealand history, but it's nothing approaching that. That's just marketing. That's just spin. But this could be a fight where Fa actually does surprise some people, but Parker still gets the win. What are you predicting to happen in this fight? What do you think is going to happen? Who's going to win and how? Drop a comment loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe. Follow me on Twitter. Boxing_squared. I'm out.